But first, of course, we want to get to the big headline today, and that is that Bill Cosby is back home after being released from prison earlier today. So what happened, right? Everyone's sort of shocked by this. So joining us to talk about it, break it all down, is Neama Rahmani, a former federal prosecutor and president of West Coast Trial Lawyers. Neama, thank you for being here. So what is the procedural error that happened that led to this?
You know, this is a stunning development today, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court releasing Bill Cosby. We thought that the issue on appeal would be the prior bad acts witnesses. That's what the court focused on during oral argument. That was a big issue at both the trial court level and the Court of Appeal. Those 5 additional women who testified during the second trial, which resulted in his conviction. The first trial obviously hung. But the court went in a very different direction. They focused on Bruce Castor, who was the former district attorney. He issued a press release saying that Bill Cosby would not be prosecuted. This was back in 2005. He actually signed that press release. And based on that representation, Bill Cosby testified in a subsequent civil case at a deposition. And he made these very incriminating statements about providing drugs to women and then having sexual contact with them. Those statements were used in the criminal trial. And ultimately, based on those statements and the victim's testimony, Cosby was convicted. And the court said, no. When you made that representation to the press that Cosby wouldn't be prosecuted, the new district attorney, when she came in, she was bound by that representation.
Wow. So it's complicated, very nuanced. Essentially, I mean, how does this happen? I mean, this seems very uncommon. I don't feel like we've ever really heard of something like this happening much before.
This is truly unprecedented and not something that anyone has ever seen or, frankly, anyone in the legal field expected. So the 2 parts are the Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incrimination. Obviously, Bill Cosby has a right to remain silent, not to incriminate himself. And essentially, the court said when the district attorney said that he wouldn't be prosecuted, he no longer had that Fifth Amendment privilege, and he had to testify in that civil case. So when a new district attorney decided to prosecute him, it was essentially a bait and switch. But the court went farther than that. They didn't just say, those statements in the civil case are inadmissible, but you can retry Bill Cosby, district attorney's office. They said, no. You actually have a deal here, a deal not to prosecute Bill Cosby. And that's normally not something you see. If you have a deal, it's either a plea agreement, a non-prosecution agreement, an immunity, something. A press release has never been an agreement for the purposes of criminal prosecution.
Is there something nefarious going on? I mean, is this to have some sort of, it seems like a backdoor deal in some way, or is this really just what's allowed to happen?
Bruce Castor has gotten a lot of flack because he was not only the district attorney in this case, let's not forget, he was most recently Trump's impeachment attorney during the proceedings in the Senate. So he's gotten a lot of pushback. And not only did he make this press release in 2005, when the new district attorney, Ms. Furman, who's actually Judge Furman, who was appointed to the bench, decided she was going to move forward and prosecute Bill Cosby. He got involved again in 2016. He actually sent an email, which was actually the subject of this opinion, where he said, when I issued that press release, I intended for Bill Cosby not to be prosecuted. So it's this really bizarre situation where you have a former prosecutor, a former district attorney getting involved in a new case that a new prosecutor decides to move forward with and say, no, you shouldn't prosecute Bill Cosby. So if there's going to be any finger pointing and any blame for this miscarriage of justice, it should really go to Castor.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for breaking all this down, because I was trying to read all of this and there's so many moving parts here. You're making it very clear, even though it is so complicated. So just to remind folks, though, because it has been a few years, what was Cosby specifically tried and convicted of back in 2018?
He was tried with a series of, it was a sexual assault of one woman, but a series of sexual assaults dating back to the 1980s. And specifically, even though there was one victim, we had what we call our 5 prior bad acts witnesses. Those are 5 additional victims who came forward to testify that Bill Cosby engaged in the same misconduct towards me. Because these sexual assault cases can be challenging as a prosecutor, especially the ones that are older. Oftentimes, there's not a lot of physical evidence. In this particular case, there weren't a whole lot of contemporaneous reports to either law enforcement or medical personnel. So when those 6 women came forward and they testified that Bill Cosby did this to me, that evidence was overwhelming. And ultimately, a jury did convict him, and he was sentenced, and he was going to essentially die in Pennsylvania State Prison. He lost the first round of appeal. And the fact that he won on appeal at the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, but not only did he win on appeal, the court said that there is an agreement for him not to be prosecuted. This was an absolutely huge win for Cosby's defense team and not something that any of us expected.
Right. And is it true that Cosby agreed to spend the full 10 years in prison instead of admitting remorse, which would have cut some of his prison sentence time down?
So whenever you're dealing with an appellate issue, you want to preserve your right to appeal. So oftentimes when criminal defendants are convicted, we actually saw this recently with Derek Chauvin last week. He didn't really make much of a statement to George Floyd's family because you don't want to say anything that may affect your ability to appeal that sentence. So Cosby didn't say anything. He wanted to remain quiet this time to preserve his appellate rights and not say something that may harm him. And ultimately, that ended up being the right decision for him and his defense team.
So what message do you think that this sends to the accusers, the dozens of women who have come forward, and other women as well who might want to come forward in the future?
It is a huge setback for the Me Too movement, unfortunately. You know, sexual assault is probably the most underreported crime in this country. So many women don't come forward out of fear, out of shame, and for all the reasons that go into the psychology of an abuse victim. And prosecutors, and we saw what happened with Castro, they don't make the hard charging decisions here. These cases are tough to get guilty convictions on. Sometimes prosecutors want to go down the easy route or, just go after low-hanging fruit. So victims don't come forward. The cases aren't prosecuted many times when they do. And now you have several of these victims who've testified through not just one, but 2 very public criminal trials to see their abuser walk free, and not walk free because of the merits of the case, because he's actually not guilty or innocent, but really walk free because of a constitutional issue, an important one, and a deal apparently that this former DA gave him, a sweetheart deal. Right. So it's a really miscarriage of justice here today.
Yeah, it is. It's hard for a lot of people to stomach right now. And I think a lot of women, I'm seeing this online, are just saying the system failed us. So is there any way to prevent something like this from happening again?
Well, it's really our elected officials and prosecutors. I know I'm talking about other cases, but we saw what happened with Jeff Epstein when he got a sweetheart deal down in Miami when Alex Acosta was a prosecutor there, gave him a slap on the wrist. And you have another prosecutor here, Bruce Castor, that really chose not to prosecute Cosby, which was the first mistake, and then basically gave him a free pass that bound the hands of subsequent district attorneys. So it's really a sad day in our criminal justice system that someone like this could walk free. And my heart goes out to the victims of Bill Cosby and other victims of sexual assault.
Absolutely. And just final question here. So he walks free. What's next for him? He just lives a free life. Is there any way that there could be another trial pending that takes him back to court?
There can certainly be no trial in state court because the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has made it clear that there was an agreement for him not to be prosecuted. There is a very slight possibility that he can be prosecuted by the feds. I think it's very unlikely. They generally don't prosecute these types of rape cases. And there's an internal Department of Justice policy called the Pettit policy that says, when a state moves forward on these cases, the Department of Justice does not. But we've seen with Derek Chauvin again, where sometimes the feds will step in. So maybe they will, and they will prosecute this case. But again, I think it's unlikely. I think he's going to be a free man.
Wow. Truly, truly stunning. All right. Neama, Rahmani, thank you so much for joining us and for breaking this all down. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.